Hey everyone, I'm Mike with the Florida Public Archaeology Network. For this video, we're going to do another one of my top 5 sites that I think that you should visit in Florida. But this time we're headed over to the north central portion of the state of Florida, an area between the Apalachicola River and the Suwannee River. This area is sometimes called Florida's Forgotten Coast, but today we're not going to forget about you. We're going to highlight some of the amazing local archaeology that you can visit in that region of the state. But as always, for these videos, the criteria for sites that I would recommend are that number 1, there are sites that have some type of archaeology there that has been interpretive, so there's something to see when you get there. Number 2, that these are sites that you can access. And number 3, of course, for this series, it's really important that there's some hiking opportunities when you actually get to the site. Okay, so let's start with number 5 on my list, and that has to be the Jackson Mounds Archaeological State Park. Jackson Mounds Archaeological State Park is 60 acres, and what's really cool about this site is that there's so much to see there. There's 2 different trail systems that you can actually hike, but where it gets its name from is the fact that there are 7 earthen temple mounds that are actually located on the site, and those are interpreted when you get there. Now, these mounds were actually constructed by the indigenous people who lived in that area over 800 years ago. There's been a number of archaeological investigations of that park, and you can learn about some of that when you actually go to that site and look at some of the signage that they have. The largest mound at the site is 36 feet tall, and it's 278 feet by 312 feet at its base. Temple mounds were constructed by the indigenous people who lived in Florida during a time period in what archaeologists often refer to as the Mississippian time period. It's basically about 1000 CE all the way to about 15 or 1600 CE. Now, there are also other historical resources at the park as well, from the Florida's territorial period, and there's even a grist mill from the 1800s. That brings us to number 4 on my list of top 5 sites to visit in north central Florida, and we're going to go over to East Point, Florida, which is located in Franklin County, and that is a site called the Apalachicola National Estuarine Research Reserve. The Apalachicola National Estuarine Research Reserve is a designated UNESCO biosphere. It's an incredibly important site where research happens as well as preservation of the natural environment around the Apalachicola River watershed. The site has over 240,000 acres, so there's plenty of opportunities at hiking, and there's even a lot of boardwalked areas, so the hiking is very accessible for peoples of many different levels. And it's really nice because when you go along the boardwalk, you'll find informational signs that tell you all about the natural environment. Now, this area of Florida is actually a biological hotspot for the entire country. And so it's no wonder that people have wanted to live in this area for thousands and thousands of years. And so there are a number of archaeological sites on the property that show evidence of human use of the area for many, many millennia. And what's great about the location is that there is a visitor center with lots of interpretive exhibits that tell you all about both the natural and the cultural area. And not only do they have a world-class research facility, but they also offer many educational opportunities at the site. Now, that brings us to the number 3 site, and that has to be the Edward Ball WAKULLA Springs State Park. The Edward Ball WAKULLA Springs State Park has 6,000 acres of preserved lands. But probably the most significant thing about the site and why so many people visit it every year is because of WAKULLA Springs. Now, WAKULLA Springs is one of the largest and deepest springs in Florida. It has beautiful crystal clear water that's 70 degrees year round. And what's amazing about this spring is just how deep it is. In fact, the spring is so picturesque and so beautiful, it's one of the reasons why several different Hollywood movies were actually shot there. So for example, in the 1940s, there was a Tarzan movie shot there, but probably the most famous movie that was shot there was The Creature of the Black Lagoon. Now, we know that people have used this area for many, many thousands of years. In fact, there's archaeological evidence that demonstrates that Paleo-Indian people, so that Native Americans who were living during the Ice Age, actually utilized the area because of the preserved material that's actually been found at the bottom of the spring, including the bones and remains of Ice Age animals like mastodons. And a really unique feature about this site too is the WAKULLA Springs Lodge. This lodge was actually constructed in the 1930s, and you can actually still visit it and stay in there today. And it's just such a beautiful area. And like many of these other sites, there's plenty of opportunities because it is a state park and preserve. There's lots of opportunities to hike around the area. Lots of signage too that tells you all about the springs and the different environment that you're actually exploring. And that brings us to number 2 on our top 5 list of sites to visit. And that for me has to be another state park called the Natural Bridge Battlefield Historic State Park. Now, like a couple of the other ones, this one is also located relatively close to Tallahassee. And this was the site of the second largest battle that took place in Florida during the American Civil War. Now, the battle occurred at this particular spot because there is actually a natural land bridge across the St. Marks River that happens in that area. And basically what was happening is the federal soldiers, about 1,000 soldiers, were trying to take the capital of Florida that was held by the Confederacy at the time in Tallahassee. And so the battle actually occurred where the Confederate and the federal forces met there on the natural bridge landscape in March of 1865. There's been a number of archaeological investigations that's actually been able to locate where the battle took place and basically figured out how, based on metal detector surveys, the battle essentially played out. It's important to note that a number of the federal soldiers who fought and died at that battlefield site were African American soldiers in the federal army. There's plenty of opportunities to go hiking as well as bird watching. There's lots of different features from the actual battle that are still there. Now that brings us to our final site that I think that you should visit in North Central Florida, and that is number 1 site, which is Mission San Luis. Now, Mission San Luis is an incredible place to visit. It has historic reconstructions as well as a museum that tells you all about the archaeology and the history of the site. In the 1650s, the Spanish constructed the site of Mission San Luis in what is now Tallahassee, Florida. And it was a mission for the Apalachicola people who had lived in that areas of the Red Hills for thousands of years. Now, not only was it a mission that the Spanish had to try to convert the native people in the area, but it is also the site of the Appalachians' major town. Between the time it operated from the 1650s all the way up to the end of the 1600s into the early 1700s, we know that was home to over 1,400 people. Their museum is really a world-class place that you can learn all about the history of the site as well as missions in general and the native people who lived in the area. And they have lots of historic costume reenacted on site. So check their hours on their website to make sure you can visit the site. Even if you don't get out to the site, there's plenty of resources online to learn all about what they have there, and they have lots of virtual programming as well. And as for this series, of course, there is actually hiking that is available in the area. And just to the north of the site is the San Luis Park, which again, there's lots of opportunities for hiking. Of course, these are just a handful of the many different local archaeological sites that you can visit in North Central. But if you think that I left some out, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your recommendations. I'd love to hear what you thought about this video, and I'd love to hear what you think if you've actually visited some of these sites yourself. There are so many others out there across the entire state that you can visit. I'm gonna put a link to the Destination Archaeology website to an interactive map that shows you all the other many different sites that you can actually go to and hike at across the entire state. I hope that you'll go out and visit some of these places safely. And remember, take only photos, leave only footprints, and I will see you next time when we go out and explore some of our amazing local archaeology.